Thanks, that's a pretty tough act to follow. I'm not sure it'll be as dynamic as, there we go, as the salad master, but we'll try. So.
All right, thank you, Reggie, so much for accepting our invitation. I know you're very busy with work and stuff like that, but being able to be here with us, it means a lot to Startup Grind and also to our community. Thank you so much. Okay, so
thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, I have already some questions that we planned for, but we also have time to take some questions from the audience. So what I'll do is to stick to what I have on my list until the end of the Fireside chat, then we can take questions from the audience. So if you have some questions, probably you can write them down, or most probably type them on your phone. People these days, we don't write, we just type on phone. So type it on your phone as a chat to yourself or to your friends so you don't forget it. But if it's really a question that you need to ask in between, feel free to cut us and I'll take the question. Okay? All right. So I know I did a bit of introduction, but most times people are always good when they introduce themselves the way they want it to be. Like, maybe there's something I missed about who you are, the intro. So could you, in your own way or in your own words, introduce yourself to the audience?
Okay, great. I would say the only thing you sort of left out was that I'm also a board member for the British and Commonwealth Chamber of Commerce of Finland. And I just recently started a position with the company as the Director of Business Consulting, a company called eSystems. So those are sort of recent activities. When I usually introduce myself in Finland, I always say I came here for the food and the weather. No one believes me, so at least that's what I try to tell folks. But I actually was working for a Finnish company, Kone, the elevator escalator company, as their global head of IT operations. So I worked for them for 15 years and quite frankly managed anything that had a CPU in it, whether or not it was in your pocket or in our global data centers, was under my jurisdiction. And kind of scrolling forward, I left Kone in 2015, and that's when I sort of officially moved to Finland. I had a young son at the time, so I took a couple years off and decided to, I was going to work with him and invest. Hopefully I'm a better father than I am investor, so I had to go back to work in 2017. And that's when I actually started SimpleTec. I thought with my background, working for one of Finland's largest companies, having large companies in the IT industry in on my CV, like Accenture, and what's now known as HP's DXC, that I wouldn't have any problem finding a job. But many internationals know that's just not true. It doesn't matter, who you are, where you come from, what you've done. If you don't have a network here, you really are nobody. And so that's when I started SimpleTec Solutions, and our mission at that time of our inception was to help small and medium-sized companies become GDPR compliant.
So. Nice, thanks for that intro. It actually leads us to the next question. So you talked about SimpleTec as your current company. So what do you guys do in SimpleTec? Like, what's the whole concept or vision of the company?
So, I categorize myself as an entrepreneur. We're not a startup. We help startups. We actually help lots of startups become GDPR compliant. And when I started, I naturally thought, okay, I'll become an IT consultant. I'll start an IT consulting company. But nobody really needs another generalist IT consultant. So I'll specialize in GDPR, because most people are really struggling with it. So back in 2017, it was just getting ready to become full effective in 2019 or 18. So I thought that, okay, we'll do this. Everybody needs this sort of help. But what I really found out was that people didn't know enough to know that they needed help. So it was actually it wasn't as natural of a start, and it didn't take off like fire like we thought it would. And then we did provide some GDPR services, and then I noticed that we had sort of specialized in the Finnish edtech space. And lots of the Finnish edtech companies, and one of the, I would say, crown jewels for Finland is their education. And the Finnish edtech companies were overlooking key markets in Africa. And so one of the things that then we started to help them do is to help the Finnish edtech companies gain traction on the continent, primarily in Nigeria and then Tanzania. So we do one, IT generalist consultant work. Two, we have great expertise in GDPR, and then three, we help companies go to Africa. And when you look at sort of the GDPR work, that we, for some reason, were able to really work a lot with startups, and that may be because we were associated with Maria and associated with a group called The Shortcut. I don't know if many of you guys have worked with them, but that's sort of how we got our start.
Nice, really good to hear that. I remember when they introduced this concept called GDPR. Back then I was still working in ISEC as a head of marketing, and somehow it became my responsibility to ensure that we are GDPR aligned. I'm like, what is this GDPR thing? How does it even work? How can an NGO or a company be GDPR aligned? I think it was a kind of a black box because people didn't really understand how it works. And there's this huge fine that if you're not compliant, you have to pay. So a lot of people were panicking. So if you are to, in a nutshell, like how can a company be GDPR aligned? If you are to give steps, the basic thing that they could do to be aligned.
What is GDPR?
Yeah, so
Are you
GDPR
trying to
Yeah, so GDPR stands for the General Data Protection Regulation. That you're not alone. So, but I would ever call you ignorant. So GDPR stands for the General Data Protection Regulation. It was signed by the EU in 2016. Companies had 2 years to become compliant. It was, in my opinion, a very foundational regulation. Because most people don't understand that in most, even westernized societies, people don't have digital rights. And so GDPR was one of the first legislations that gave people actually digital rights. I'm from the US. In the US, quite frankly, we don't have digital rights. That's why our data gets exploited all over the place from a humanistic perspective. And that's why Cambridge Analytics and all of these other things happen, is because people are able to mine your data from your digital profile and really actually exploit you. I gave a presentation to some students a year and a half ago that came from the US, and they had that US bravado that once you come out of the US, you understand maybe isn't the best approach. And I explained to them, in the agricultural age, who was being exploited?
Many years ago, one of the first organizations, you remember, ISACA, that was producing all kind of regulations and regulators, educating regulators in the ethics of data use.
Yeah.
These people are still...
Yeah, they still exist, and data ethics is also one of the things that the world is struggling with, and AI has opened up this whole
I think that
discussion.
I still pay a few euros per year, and I get all the magazines. Not always I open them because they are so difficult to understand sometimes.
The easy way to, I think that people should think about this, and again, I'll go back to this analogy of, in the agricultural age, the farmers were being exploited. In the industrial age, the factory workers were being exploited. Now we're in the information age, so who's being exploited? Who are the users?
End users.
Everybody.
Everyone in this room.
Everybody.
And people don't understand that you're being exploited through your data. And if you also look back to those different eras, there was mass uprisings because the farmers were being taken advantage of, and then legislation changed. In the industrial age, there was mass uprisings, riots, the factory workers went on strike, and then legislation changed. Well, now, in this age, legislation has changed without that mass uprising, which means that the users don't understand they're being taken advantage of still. And that's one of the core issues of GDPR. And people sort of look at it as, what is this thing that's causing me an issue? When you should look at it from the perspective that this is something that's protecting my digital footprint. And my digital footprint will outlast my human footprint, my physical presence. And no, that's something that I think the world is sort of really, upside down on. And we as users should start to pay attention to how our data is being used and how the messages are being crafted to us. We know that Britex was engineered based on using people's data profile to send them selected messages to sway their voting opinion. That's big shit, right? People don't, pardon my French, is something that we don't pay attention to. And if the elections in my country were swayed using the same principles and practices. And that's why GDPR is so important. When you think that, most people will sit and think, well, I'm not doing anything bad, so why do I care if someone, has my digital profile? Yeah, question?
In that case, how is Facebook compliant with GDPR?
They're not, and
Because
Facebook
they are
is,
selling our data.
yeah, they've made some attempts to change their practices. They try to stay one step ahead of the law, if you will, but most countries within EU are going after Facebook, going after Google, going after a lot of the companies that are using your data in the wrong way.
One of the things that Facebook, I can tell you because I had made some work there, stop asking after Cambridge Analytica what's your identity card. For a period of time, when they were suspecting that you were not, in order to authenticate your identity, they used to ask you, please send us a picture of one of your identity cards. This completely stopped. They don't do it anymore.
Yeah, that's stopped as well. They also were trying to impress upon the face recognition as a way of, and then they've stopped that as well. So it has had a positive impact, and it is something that personally you should pay attention. From a business perspective, the steps to become GDPR compliant are quite easy. One, you need to understand what personal data your company has. So if you're a startup, you actually have an advantage because typically you don't have a lot of personal data. Coney was 4 years old now. Think of how much data that company has. Right, that's a fairly significant issue. But if you're working for a young company or a startup, you typically don't have a lot of data. So you need to understand where the data is in your organization. You need to understand how you collected that data. Did you have a correct legal basis for that? If you didn't, then you need to either ask for permission or you need to get rid of it. Yeah. The third thing that you need to do is whenever you process that data, you need to make sure you have a legal basis for processing that data. And then you need to document your processes and secure the data. And you actually must prove your compliancy. There is no certificate. So if we did business, I helped you become compliant, I can't give you a certificate for compliancy. You prove your compliancy through the documentation that you have and that you've been able to demonstrate what you documented. That's it. So sorry, you had a question before I...
Yeah, I think that you remember the case of the Corona Act in Finland. That's sort of as aligned with GDPR to use.
I haven't done
Because it was a
the...
big propaganda.
Right, yeah, and I haven't done the analysis on it. I don't have the app because I know how data can be used. So one of the other things that people need to be aware of is, like, a lot of us have wearables. I don't particularly have any, but a lot of us have wearables. There was a Finnish company that had a huge data breach that exposed a secret military base in the UK from the US. Because they had everybody's location data in their profile. And so when they did the analysis of the data, they wondered, why is there a concentration of these fit people in this location in the UK? And that was because there was a military base there that was a secret. So the data that can be collected on you by your wearables, by your phone, by all sorts of things, it's no problem if it's used as it was designed to be used. But if it falls in the wrong hands, then you have a real issue.
I have a question as a professional. I don't know what are you thinking.
Sorry, let me finish the story. Not only did it expose the base, but it exposed the addresses of servicemen for all the European countries.
Through their wearables.
Yeah, through their wearables. That's top secret information.
But is it related to legislation in different countries? Like, I remember sometimes after the September 11, some European countries, they sign agreement with the states. So when you are traveling, once you just book your tickets, they know instead that where you are traveling. Is that kind of?
Yeah, there's the, again, my country doesn't have GDPR. So California has just signed the California Consumer Protection Act, which is CCPA, which is very close to GDPR, and it'll start introducing the GDPR principles into the U.S. But yeah, I definitely would say lots of the practices that most governments, including Finland, have are not GDPR compliant. The fact that you can take the license plate number of my car, type it into a system here in Finland, and find my address and telephone number is not GDPR compliant. And I know specifically that happened because unfortunately I was parked in someone's space one time and they called me up and said, your car is in my spot.
That's very complicated.
This is Finland.
That's very
And definitely that's not GDPR compliant.
Yeah.
So lots of countries still struggle with it.
I think there's a lot of questions and interesting conversations around, like the GDPR. So I don't know if, because I've seen a lot of hands up, do you feel comfortable us taking all the questions now as they're going, or do you want us to?
However you want to play it. So I can talk about GDPR, unfortunately, for a long time.
Yeah,
So
we can definitely have a GDPR workshop in the future, because
we can do that.
if we just do only GDPR, it wouldn't necessarily, do justice to everything we planned for today, because he has a lot of other experience he want to share with us. So maybe what we can do is we'll have the quick questions at the end of the fireside chat, but with the demand, we can have probably a workshop around GDPR, because all of what he's saying makes sense, but I think it requires a lot of practicality for you to really see how to be compliant, because it's not just about the information he's giving, but it's also how you can make it work for you. So I don't know if you guys don't mind, we can keep all the questions to the end of the fireside chat. Is it okay by us?
Yeah.
Nice. Okay, cool. So you said that you worked for, was it 12 or 15 years in the corporate field before you moved as an entrepreneur?
No, so something like that. I worked for 15 years for Kone. So along with the food and the weather, I tell everybody I'm not as young and sexy as I look. So I've got over 30 years of IT experience, enterprise IT experience. So I probably was coding before lots of you guys were born. So that's my, I didn't go through my full history, only the last sort of 20 years of history, but I worked for lots of companies in the U.S. in different capacities, both on the private side as well as on the service delivery side, developing IT solutions or managing IT solutions.
So what made you switch to the entrepreneurial world, and how was the transition from the corporate world to this entrepreneurial?
Yeah, so I touched on it briefly. I became an entrepreneur out of need. I had over 30 years experience in the corporate world. When I came to Finland, it was very difficult to find work. I mean, people were just flat out not replying to calls or to resumes or to whatever. If they did reply, it was you're overqualified. That was how the conversations would go. And so after I struggled with that for a few months, I decided to start my own company, which wasn't necessarily easy because, the one thing that if you've been in Finland for a while, you know that your network is everything. So then I had to go on a huge campaign to expand my network and to get my name out there so people would be comfortable hiring me as a consultant. So I would say the transition personally was, it was interesting and challenging. Because I worked for at one point in time, I was a vice president at Kone. So, when I ended, I was the head of an organization that, at one point in time, I had 200 team members below me. So, now I became a single entrepreneur. There was no one to do anything. I had to do everything, and that was, you have to, I always say, you're either hunting, cleaning, killing something, cleaning it, and then you go back to hunting because you need to eat on a routine basis. And at different points in my career, I would be involved in different pieces of that cycle, but not fully responsible for the whole chain, or not fully active in the whole chain, even if I was responsible for it. So that was one of the bigger things. Not that I like getting my hands dirty, so it wasn't an issue, but it was just the realization that I had to be marketing, I had to be sales, I had to be delivery, I had to, all of those things an entrepreneur has to become to be successful. Unless you you're building a team and you're doing all of these other things. And I wanted to provide services versus starting to build a startup, if you will.
All right, cool. You said you are not a startup. You wouldn't consider SimpleTec as a startup, but more like as an entrepreneur. So, what would you say is the difference between a startup and an entrepreneur?
Well, you mentioned it in one of your previous comments. Startups are meant to scale, full stop. So, it's difficult for me to scale me. I was basically selling me as the service provider. So, yep, I can hire more people. I had a Swedish speaking Finn as a business partner, so we could provide services in Finnish, Swedish, and English. But other than that, we use partners for all of our other services. So that's the primary difference between being an entrepreneur and being a startup. And even some entrepreneur activities can grow and scale. So, but not on the massive level. So I know a group of guys, Sri Lankan guys that started off changing winter tires, and they scaled it to now they clean and services the buses for all of the major Finnish metropolitan areas. So they got an 8 to 10 million euro business, and they started out. So they, quite frankly, they scaled, but they still were not a startup.
Interesting. I think I agree with that point, because in the definitions of startups and with the people we consider to be startups are always tech-powered and easily to scale, where you don't necessarily need too much human resource, but with the tech you have, it's easy for you to scale. For like Uber, Airbnb, they have the tech behind it, so they can, go to whichever country, whichever city, and all of that, and it's easy for them to scale. So if you look at this from that perspective, then I think it makes a lot of sense, because as a startup, it's either you grow or probably you die.
Yeah, exactly.
But as an entrepreneur, you can be an entrepreneur for the rest of your life. You might decide not to get new clients and all of that. You're okay with your level, but as a startup, if you get okay, a competitor will come and take over. You just go out of business.
Yeah, you don't have the economies of scale.
Okay, you also help Finnish companies to go to Africa. Was it Nigeria specifically, or?
Started in Nigeria because you don't know you're Nigerian, but most Finnish people don't understand that Nigeria, when you look at it specifically as a country, is 220 million people now. Right, and most people don't understand that the city of Lagos is 20 million people, right? I know you know this, I don't have to tell you, but it's 20 million people. And in the next 20 to 30 years, the country will double in size, which means there'll be 440 million people around. And if you're in the edtech space, what more do you want but a market size for the next 20 years of additional 220 million people? So not only that, Nigeria has a really strong private education sector, which means that they understand and they're willing to pay for education services, which is not something we have here. You know, they already spend 20 billion euros a year educating their kids. Nobody in Finland really knows that though, right? Everyone thinks that it's a rather poor country and this, that, and other. They're not understanding it's like the Norway of Africa. It's an oil country, and you have extreme poverty and you have extreme wealth. But you because of its connections, and I believe back to the UK, education has always been one of the things that has been highly sought after. And so if you look at by 2050, the top countries that will be in the top 10, 5 or 7 will be from Africa. And there's already over 1 billion people on the continent, but Africa is divided into 40 or 54, 53 countries, depending on how which countries you recognize. And so it's already as a continent the same size as India and China, but it's growing faster than both of those countries are now. You know, Jack Ma says that Africa is where China was 20 to 30 years ago. So you know, the Chinese can definitely see that this is the next growth opportunity, but Finland is always, and everyone looks at the US as a big growth market. And I'm telling people that you definitely keep your eyes on that prize, but look at other markets as well. So Nigeria and Tanzania, the primary language is English. So everything that you've done to prepare yourself for the English market or the UK market or the US market or the UK market, you can just wash and recycle for those two markets. And if you can get in on the ground level, which you can't get in on the ground level in the US anymore, that's gone.
But there is a huge critical problem in Nigeria.
Mm-hmm.
Is the level of corruption, which is the first.
Corruption is everywhere.
But I mean, for the mentality, the Finnish mentality.
So there was just an article in the Finnish
tax.
newspaper about who's the company that does the Finnish gambling systems? Veikkaus. What did they do? Right, the main system that controls the gambling systems, they're under scrutiny because we can see that maybe, as my business partners say, it doesn't smell of Chanel. So, and that's something that I think that we need to start looking at. What I've noticed working with Nigeria specifically is that you can definitely find business people that are no different than anywhere else in the country and in the world. And all of the transactions that I have had with Nigerians have been very clean. So I'm sure I can find corruption there, just like I'm sure I can find corruption here. And yeah, definitely I can't say that my country is the least corrupt country that you will find. So I think this is one of those perception issues that, quite frankly, I'm out to change because I've seen different. Especially when you're working in the private education sector in Nigeria, those are private businessmen and women. Who are they going to be cheating out of something? They're looking for competitive advantage because it's a really competitive market space. And they're willing to pay for something that can give them a competitive edge. And I would say there's also, Rwanda really led this charge of becoming a people-centric country. And so now you see that there's several countries on the continent that are following that lead. You know, Tanzania, Uganda, all of them are seeing that if we become, more people-focused and less corrupt, our economy grows. And so there's lots of positive examples of doing business on the continent in a corruption-free environment. Will you find corruption there? Yes. Can we find corruption here? Yes. Is there corruption in my country? I didn't ask you where you were from, but...
I'm from Morocco and we are doing good business with Nigeria.
Yeah.
As you know.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm sure that you guys have had your fingers burned. So if you remember the Corona scandal that we had here in Finland also. Right, so I think that across the continent, we need to start saying here, telling really reality. I think that we've shown only one side of the picture, and there's a lot of positive stories to tell as well. But I would not go into any new market without a good local partner.
Yes, definitely.
Right. So, and you need that whether or not you're in Asia, or in Africa, or you're in the U.S. So, you have to always go in with your eyes wide open.
That's why you need him. So if you are planning to go to Nigeria, he already helped some companies go. So it's easy because it makes a lot of sense, right? It's a new market, different culture, different people. So most times you are either gonna learn how to engage and interact with them, or you find someone that understands how it works and it makes it smooth, Because it all depends on how you look at the country, Of course, there's corruption everywhere, like you said, but when you look at one area, you tend to like not pay attention to every other opportunity that could come out of it. If you look at the media, the stuff you see, it's more or less one-sided. Because I come from Nigeria, so I understand when you say like there's corruption in Nigeria, but there's huge opportunity in Nigeria. When you talk about the private education, it's huge. It's like because I went to a private school.
Yeah, I know.
Here in Finland, it's opposite, I would say, because there we spend more in the private schools. We pay much more like school fees and all of that, because we really want like the parents, they want their kids to be trained and stuff like that. So that EdTech is a very big market in Nigeria because everybody is putting all their money in education.
Right.
So why not go somewhere that the number is there,
Right.
and it's English speaking, right?
The other thing is that, I just specialized in ed tech because out of happenstance. But with a market that big, everything is needed. So, I don't think there's a product anywhere that's being developed that wouldn't be needed in a market of that size. And if you have 1%, 2% of those market sizes, you're a king. So I think that, Finland needs to become an export country, and it needs to invest more into changing sort of the narrative for Africa. The other areas have been, not exploited, but it's no longer are you able to even get in on the ground floor. So I can't say enough good things about doing business in Africa. So, and I think that lots of people, especially the younger people, are sort of championing this cause to do business in a more appropriate way. And that's what you see. And a lot of the citizens are demanding that things are done in a different way.
Cool. Thanks for that clarification. And because you already did some business in Nigeria, for example, or in other parts of Africa like Rwanda, Tanzania, Kenya, I think it starts to give you a different kind of mindset. Because let's say, for example, you've never been to any country in Africa. The only thing you know about Africa is what you see on the media.
Yeah. Yeah, that was sort of, and now I'll take this time to take a dig at Nigerians. When I went to Lagos and I posted some pictures of the opera house that's in Lagos, and I had Nigerians going, "Wow, where is that?" And I'm like, "You must be joking." It would be like a Finn person saying, I'll show a picture of Finlandia Hall, and they go, "Where is this?" This is your country. We've been so misled about what other countries in the world are. And again, I blame social media, all of these other things. But people are, not just Nigerians said this comment, but I was surprised to get it from Nigerians also. This place is beautiful. Where is it? When I showed pictures of Dar es Salaam and Tanzania, it's amazing places. And people are willing and wanting to do business with foreigners as well. Because they've had a longer history of people outside of their nationality in their country.
All right, so moving forward, now let's talk a bit about Hey Network.
Okay.
Because you are the current chairman,
Mhm.
and I think it would be nice for the audience to understand what is Hey Network, what you guys do, and what's sort of the plan on how to integrate entrepreneurs and startup in Helsinki.
So Hey Network stands for the Helsinki Entrepreneurs International, and it's sponsored by the Helsinki Yrittäjät. And it is well, I'll start with a couple of interesting statistics. So I don't know if anyone's ever heard me talk before, but any guess how many international entrepreneurs there are in Finland?
Statistically, difficult to
So
say.
there's 10,000. There's over 10,000 of us, which is a fairly large number. And we represent 3.5 billion in GDP every year, which in my opinion is an astounding number, which is another fact that you don't hear in Finland. So could you say that's corruption? If you hear lots about internationals, but you never hear statistics like that. In the capital region, 1 in every 3 businesses that started is started by an international. So clearly, 1/3 of new businesses are started in the Helsinki region by an international person. And so that's why it's important that the Helsinki Yrittäjät and the rest of the sort of entrepreneur society understand that there's a large population of people that, one, can help companies go abroad. They can be used to implement new services, new products, new ideas. So this is sort of the foundation of the Hey Network. It's actually a network of both Finnish-owned entrepreneurs and international-owned entrepreneurs coming together to see how we can do business, how we can help each other. And that's the premise. And so we set up sessions a lot like this one. As a matter of fact, I think we met at a session where I was doing a GDPR session for Hey, and in conjunction with NewCo, where we will have a speaker and then we have networking. So very similar style to this. Actually we had our what we call a business day last night, and we gave away our award for 2019 and 2020 for the internationalizer of the year. And two great people won those awards. But we typically have 3 to 4 sessions or business dates a year. We're thinking of having our next one virtually with NewCo, because it looks like we may not be able to interact face to face as much as we'd like to, for the rest of the year, depending on how things go. So that is Hey.
How can someone join this network? Let's say someone want to be part of it. How does it work?
So we like people to be part of the Helsinki Yrittäjät, and then you can join the Hey Network, but that's not a hard and fast rule. We're really just a group or a network that comes together in social media. So you can join our Facebook page if you go out and just look for Hey Network, HEI Network, and you'll see that, and you can join the group. So that's as simple as that. We prefer active members. So if you'd like to come in and help us set up, or for you guys that you understand what having active members are, that's just some other organizations where active members are always help the groups grow. So, I would say please go look at us, especially if you're an entrepreneur or it's something that you want to do. Or if it's something, if you think that you could add value to a Finnish business by helping them go to Morocco, as an example, or something like that, I think is a good place to start networking. So.
Cool. Does anyone have any question so far? No.
Yes.
Okay, please go.
I have a question about GDPR. So can we switch to that topic?
Oh my God.
Only not GDPR, they already say.
Yeah.
Only not that subject.
So can we switch to that subject again, or just
Yeah,
We I'm here for as long as you need.
One-to-one, maybe.
Yeah, I just want to know. Yeah, as we know that currently data is really essential in the development of AI, and I guess that Europe is somehow lagging behind the US and China because they have these strict rules of using this data for the AI development and the AI research. So my question is, how can we compromise between the AI embracing the AI and developing the AI research, meanwhile respecting the GDPR and data protection?
I guess the way I see it, Europe isn't necessarily lagging. If it is lagging, I don't think it's lagging because of the use of personal data. There's a lot of ways to abstract the personal pieces from the data. So GDPR doesn't stop you from processing data. It just makes sure that you handle it in an appropriate way and that you have a legal basis for processing the data. So, if we sort of start there, you can do anything you have legal permission to do with someone's data. The fact that people are doing things that they don't have a legal basis for doing should not be applauded. In the U.S. and in China, China has a Data Protection Act. Typically everybody has to follow it outside of maybe the government, but the U.S. are typically those ways as well. So the U.S. will start to self-correct because the legal nature of the U.S. So once people really start to form class action suits with Facebook or with Google or with some of these other countries companies that have had either massive data breaches or they violated their data practices, they'll start to, you'll see the fines, and people think that 20 million euros is a big fine. I know you could fall in the street or be hit by a car and get 20 million euros in the US. It's a big fine by European standards. It's not a big fine by the US standards at all. 20 billion might start to be considered a big fine. And if you think Facebook makes, 40 to 50 billion a year? What is 20 million euros? Really, if I make $500 a day today and you ask me for 20 cents? Really? So, I think that we need to look at that. I work with a lot of things in AI. AI ethics is something that is, should be on everybody's mind. But we need to look at how we protect people's rights in that versus how we continue to say, this is holding up business. We have the same things with health regulations. You can't just use everybody's health data for everything. You can't use, the data has been regulated in some way, shape, or form in a lot of places for a long time. Your financial data is much more heavily regulated in the US than it is in Europe, especially in Finland, right? It's easy to see what people make in Finland. That's definitely taboo in the US. So does that stop us from handling these services, AI services in the US that deal with financial data? No. They take the regulation into consideration and they still build great products on it. So.
You allow me a comment here, I will make a short comment. As an educated user, I even educated my children already to that position. I think that any user from very beginning should conscientize to be aware how much he really wants to put all his life in social networks and telling all what he does, all what he likes, all what he buys, all what he thinks in social networks, especially in the most popular social networks, and how much he wants to use actually his real identity there if he's allowed to use any other name, like Pasila Bolle or like Tikurila Helsinki, and do whatever he wants in the social networks with a beautiful esoteric name, especially now that he doesn't need an identity card. Because what you say is really frightening. If somebody can get into the plate of my cars or my medical history without my authorization, wow, we cannot do anything about it. but not telling all what you do in your life every day in Facebook with your real name, this is something that we really can correct.
Yeah, definitely you can change your behavior. I would say that the younger generations are already aware of this. And so that's one of the things us old guys, we forget. We have the perspective of now. And in this case, all of you guys are old. So I'll give you a good example. Yeah, I said it. So my stepdaughter was 9 at the time, and she showed me a video of her and some girls dancing at school. And it was like, oh, that's really cool. You should put that in the family WhatsApp group. And she looks at me and she says, I need to talk to the rest of the girls to see if it's okay. Right, so I'm the GDPR guy. And she's telling me that she needs to protect the rights of the other girls that were in the video. And so that's another thing that businesses need to understand, kind of going back to your other point, your customer is changing. They will no longer accept the same practices that we, as the old people, have grown up with. So the quicker you change, the more you can use that as your competitive advantage. So it's one of the things that we at SimpleTec kind of, and we're one of the only companies that I would see that would promote this, is how do you make GDPR competitive advantage, not just adhere to the regulation. And you do that by appealing to the people that are sensitive to how their data is used. And if you're the first first company or partner in the market that's talking about how well you protect that data, people will gravitate to you over time, and probably more sooner than you can believe.
Yeah.
Yes, so you mentioned how car ownership information, for example, is public in Finland. Of course, most governmental documents by law have to be public in Finland. So do you find this publicity law to be contradictory with GDPR?
Some of it is, but you have to ask, in this case, I would ask, what is public? If you look up my license plate registration, should it be public record that my address and my phone number are there? That risks the rights of the data subject. Luckily, Finland is a very safe country. The other thing I could have said is that, do you know that Trafi actually sells that data to marketing companies?
You can switch it off, so you can actually restrict from your information being sold by Trafi to others.
Yeah, good point. How many of you people know that?
Well, I know.
Yeah.
You're a smart guy.
Yeah. Most people don't.
That's a
Yeah, and there's your healthcare data is being shared in places. I'm sure you can turn it off someplace as well. But by default, the way the law is written is you shouldn't have to turn it off. Right? The law says you need to opt in, not opt out.
Confidentiality.
Yeah, but then
There's no yeah but to that.
I work in healthcare industry. When it comes down to healthcare data, I have firsthand handled a lot of healthcare data, and I can also see certain aspects of the positive part of sharing. Do you also know that Scandinavia, especially Finland and Sweden, is considered the best place for doing clinical trials, which actually lead to a lot of new drugs coming into the market? And why is that? If the data is so easily being breachable here, then why is people coming down from other places? The discovery has been done in other part of the world, and they are coming down here for the clinical trial. That's basically.
But saying that assumes that people won't allow their data to be used for certain clinical trials. So you should have the ability to say whether or not your data is used in trials.
Yeah, that's like saying that a 2-year-old kid should have the ability of deciding what he will eat.
No, but their guardian should. That's why you establish a guardian when you look at it from a legal basis.
Yeah, Yeah, so.
Right, yeah, I would definitely know one saying a 2-year-old should do, and the law establishes a guardian in their case.
So
to
very
do that.
often, yeah, I have firsthand seen that when people switch off or restrict the access of the data, it creates actually indirect problems for them.
That
But
is
they can't
their
understand.
choice.
But they don't know that. It's like, that's why I gave the analogy of this 2-year-old kid.
Mhm.
He or she doesn't know what he's doing. Even to switch on or switch off,
Mhm.
I'm sure you understand it. So I don't have any doubts on your ability. And a lot of people do it nowadays. And the data education is going way forward. But I have firsthand seen cases where people have switched off everything because of thinking to be safe, and in the process actually endangers them.
That I mean, if I decide to drive without insurance, right, which would be silly, stupid even.
Well, the point
But
is
if I have an
you understand
accident,
that.
then I have to pay out of my pocket. I made that choice.
Yeah, but you need to understand the value of the choice you're making.
If possible.
So,
But we still have to, is the data yours or is the data theirs?
no, data is theirs.
Who,
The person's data.
then if the data is mine, then I should have full responsibility for managing how my data is used.
That means an education, or rather understanding.
I'm not going to argue that point, but if you're telling me that the data is used without my knowledge, I don't have that responsibility.
So,
And all I'm advocating for is that I get the choice. I make the choice, not anyone else.
Sorry to interrupt, sorry. It's like, I don't know, it's
Yeah,
getting
you
into
know,
some
but-
dialogue, which is really good, but just so we don't go over time and probably ignore other people's question, for
Can I-
example.
Reggie, can I add 1 minute question?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, in order to break the dialogue, I will make it a trialogue. He has a very important point. What will be the problem if they take the data anonymous from this person for research, even with the permission of the person or even without the permission of the person, and just put an XY name and use the data without the name of the person? I don't understand why they need the person identity in order to use the data for research.
Yeah,
If you-
and that's, let me address the question. So if you can truly anonymize the data, then it's not under the scope of
Yes.
GDPR. So let's start from that.
Exactly, because
So,
it's for research.
but typically, you can, GDPR says that personal data is either direct or indirect. So if you can correlate 2 different data points and still pinpoint who we're talking to, then that data is considered as personal. So the other thing that we need to bring on the table is who benefits from these clinical trials.
Group detailed report in a place, and he was involved in an accident. So when the equivalent of 112, I'm masking some of the information, equivalent of 112 was going there, they didn't know which blood bag to carry for this person.
That's, unfortunately, one of the 6 legal bases for processing personal data is public health. So they have access to that data because it is a public health issue. They're not sharing it with any company, so that it's not, I want to make sure that people understand what the law says versus what you might think is going on. So there's 6 legal bases to process personal data.
Yeah.
Public health is one of those. So people who are in 112, they have full access to that.
Yeah, so that's why I told that I masked some of the data.
Yeah, so what we're talking about is clinical trials. Clinical trials, one could argue is public health, but the question people need to ask is whose data, who's the owner of the data, who's actually getting the value out of these things. So this is how people get exploited. So the factory workers and the agricultural workers, other people were making the lion's share of the money off of their backs. And that's what's happening to you today as the information worker. So Facebook is the $44 billion company.
Oh,
What are you? They're getting rich off of your data. The pharmaceutical companies, yes, they provide a good service for what? Profit.
Well, yeah, that's why it's
Yeah.
said.
Sorry,
Yes,
the
sir.
question.
So to build up on the previous question, Omakanta has the feature where you can like hide your data or like forbid your data from being given out to your care provider.
Yeah.
So does it mean that if you can process personal information in the name of public health, does that mean that even if you forbid data sharing from Omakanta, doctors can still access it?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so why is the option there then?
I'm not sure why they put it there. So if you arrive at a hospital unconscious, how can they get your consent?
They can't.
They can't. So they have the power to do what's in their in their power to provide a service to you. It's no more simple than that.
As far as I know, the Umakanta actually restricts from giving your information for marketing.
For third parties, it's third party.
Third party systems. It's not.
It's not for
public
giving
health
care.
system.
Okay. Yeah. But it would, for example, mean that if I went to Deliverance Tower, they wouldn't access it. Or
If it's part of, so Finland shares your data quite against GDPR practice, so we should establish that, number one. So they most likely do have access to your data regardless of what the law says. So I'm not sure in this specific case, but I'm sure they have access to the data. If it is an emergency service, they need to give you care. If it's elective, they may not have access to the data. So you have to distinguish between those
From
two.
the Western world, what is the country that respects more the GDPR? What is the country that is the lowest? From Western countries, I mean, on the
In Europe, you see, and I can only answer sort of for Europe, the Netherlands, Belgium, even a lot of the Latin countries. A lot of people say that Spain and Italy and these countries don't respect your data, but they do. They do more so than it is respected here. So you have to think that Finland only had, even though we've had Finnish companies that have had huge data breaches that have exposed quite sensitive things, those companies have never been fined. Posty has been fined. They were fined 100,000 euros for something minor, and there was one other fine that was also really minor.
Sorry, I make a comment on this.
Yeah.
Probably people don't know it on my own experience. In Posti, at the beginning, they propose you a service by which they will tell you in the application what is your package or something, but they were not very clear on the boxes where you sign VVVV. In one of the boxes say, don't send me any more paper. Put all my papers there on your application and all your private correspondence, medical letters, legal letters and everything was coming in PDF through the internet, not to your correspondence at home. This is an infringement, very clear infringement of GDPR.
If you've given consent, it's not an infringement.
Exactly, but it was not very clear in
Right.
the questions when
But
you
that
install
is
the
also
application.
another, you should be highly transparent. on
Then
what
you have to run there and say, no,
Right.
I want these letters, all of them in paper in my home because
But
they are
Finland was
private.
one of the last countries to actually issue fines for GDPR, and the
Yes.
fines that they've issued have been really slaps on the wrist. So, in Finland is typically a very litigious country. You know, if there's a law, people follow it.
All the excuse there in the application was in order to save paper. Hey, you save paper and you get all your privacy.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of education on this GDPR because most times it's due to, should I say, ignorance. So of course it could be that the companies are not being very transparent, but you on the other side, they say that ignorance is not an excuse to the law, right? So you need to be able to read and understand what is happening. So the choices you make, the decisions you make, the boxes you tick and stuff like that. So that's why we are having this kind of fireside chat. So you get to understand more about GDPR, about your rights, your data and all of that. So that before you tick all those boxes in all those terms and conditions, you read through, understand the kind of data you are giving out. Because it's information age, right? You need to pay attention. So if you don't pay attention, what will happen will happen. So at the end of the day, it's more or less this company is giving you education on if you untick the box, what will happen, like the implication. Let's say if you don't give them the data, of course, maybe something bad might happen to you or something like that. But if they don't let you know, you wouldn't be aware of it and you can untick the box. So instead of them probably trying to use your data without your notice, it's easier for them to tell you why they want to use your data and why you should tick that box for them to have access to your data. If you don't tick the box, what will happen? If we understand all of these implications, it's like you already know why you are giving your data to Facebook. And some people will be willing to give their data to Facebook because they make shitloads of money from Facebook. Maybe, I don't know, they're getting business connections and stuff like that. And the platform is free, right? So if you understand that, this box you're ticking it and this is what's going to happen, and you did it anyways, then it's more like...
But I say, my friend, like Reggie said, there should be obligated to standards of transparency, because at the beginning, when this happened to me with Posti, I say, maybe my Finnish is not good enough, and that's true. Then my Finnish family came and said, to me happened the same. They speak perfect Finnish.
Most people
I
don't
say,
really pay
run
attention to what
immediately
they're-
and click it off there in the
Yeah.
application.
Yeah, most people will trade their data away for what do I look
Or
like?
peanuts.
Yeah,
As a cat.
I think we would, maybe after this COVID, when things are a bit more stable, we can have a workshop around GDPR if you allow and if you are up for it. So we can have more of a practical workshop where you can make all your questions, you can bring all the documents on GDPR that has happened in your life to understand. And he will be able to probably give you like a proper, even if you have a company and you want your company to be GDPR aligned, and there are some black box you don't understand, it will be easier for him to explain the details. And if you can hire his company to take care of your GDPR activity, that would be perfect. So let's worry from your side. Let the experts do what they know how to do best. So with that, I would like to, I don't know, do you have any final words before I...
This subject is very hot potato.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I know it interests some, it doesn't interest everyone, so I want to be aware that not everybody is really interested in it. But I mean, I don't have any other final words. I'm here, I'll be at the after, at Hello Stranger, so we can talk more. I'll take another question or comment.
I'm sorry,
Mhm.
it's also about GDPR. Is there like a GDPR policy in Finland or at the European
Authority.
level? And who's giving the fine? And like who's taking care of it in Finland? Because we have companies in Finland, so we should be aware of it. And like, I don't know, it's not so transparent because I don't know where to look for. Like, if you miss this, you get this fine or this fine. Or
So yeah, glad you
I'm
had
not
one
posting,
question. So the GDPR is a European level legislation, but each country has certain pieces they can define.
Do you have customers who got the fine and then maybe they
I don't have any
paid
customers
it?
that have gotten fines. And I actually tell people, especially in Finland, getting fined is not your biggest issue. Your biggest issue is if your customers can't do business with you because you're not compliant. So the company I work for now, we are making sure that we are compliant because compliant companies must work with compliant companies if there is any personal data sharing. And so your biggest risk area is that your customers will not be able to do business with you. So
Related
that's
to the
far
same
more.
question, there is some legislation currently advancing in Finnish Parliament or something like this. I think that I read something concerning
Yeah, they're always making different changes to other laws that could be
where
related.
before, and
Yeah.
I think that I read
Yeah,
something.
there's another law that was just
Helsinki
I
Times or something.
haven't read it as much. Yes?
I'm sorry, another question. How did you break the ice in Finland as an entrepreneur? Because I think that's very difficult.
Yeah. So again, I mentioned the shortcut before. I actually got lots of services for them. I was working for them as well. But one of the things I pitched to them and I pitched to Maria 01 is that I would give a series of free GDPR seminars to the general public, but geared towards the community at Maria 01. And I partnered with Maria's law firm, and we did them jointly, and that was how I got my name out and broke out. So I gave a series of what is GDPR to people, and that's how I got most of my customers, as well as built my reputation. But a very good question.
All right, we will have the networking after this, and we also have the after party, so you can bring all your questions to Reggie. He's still around, so if you have some of these questions, you can approach him, so that other people don't get bored of questions and all of that, because I see that a lot of people are interested in this GDPR, but we'll find a way to make a proper workshop so you all can benefit from it. But with that being said, and if you don't, like you said, you already had I could say you already had your final words, for example, and yeah, we want to stick to the time we promised you guys, so we don't go above it. And with that being said, I would like to thank you, Reggie, for your time and for sharing your experience. That would be the end of the Fireside chat now. If we could just give him a round of applause for his time.